In the dead of winter, a veteran trucker stops for a woman stranded in the snow. But when tension turns to gunfire and she flashes a badge, he's forced to question everything he thought he knew, including who the real enemy is. The wipers groaned across the windshield, pushing back a curtain of sleet that seemed to fall sideways. Fred Clarkson gripped the wheel of his aging Peterbilt, eyes squinting through the storm. The CB radio crackled useless static. Snow had swallowed most of the highway signs hours ago, and the world beyond the beams of his headlights had narrowed to a tunnel of white chaos. The delivery was late, there was no fighting that. Wyoming had turned against him, throwing ice, wind, and road closures in his path. He just needed a safe spot to hunker down, ride it out. His thermos was down to lukewarm, his fingers aching beneath thick gloves. Then, just ahead, through the swirls of snow, a shape, small, dark, and hunched. Fred let out a breath. What in God's name? As he rolled closer, the shape became a figure. A young woman, arms wrapped around herself, standing beside a crumbling rest stop sign half buried in drift. Her hood was down. She wasn't waving, just standing there. Fred slowed to a crawl, hazard lights blinking in the whiteout. He'd seen all kinds on the road. Drifters, broken-down travelers, even the occasional scam. But there was something in the way she stood, still stubborn against the wind, that made him stop. He rolled down the passenger window halfway. "Miss, you all right?" She didn't answer right away, just looked at him. Pale cheeks, windburned nose, lips tight and chapped. "Need a lift?" he asked. Still nothing. Then finally, she nodded once. "Please." Fred leaned across, popped the door open, and helped her climb up. She was soaked, shivering. He handed her the backup blanket from the bunk and a steaming mug from the thermos lid. Her hands trembled so violently that some coffee spilled on her jeans. "You got a name?" he asked, easing the rig back onto the road. "Kelsey," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "Thanks. Where you headed?" "West." Fred glanced at her. "That's a little vague." She sipped from the cup, avoiding his eyes. "Sorry. Just west." He didn't push it. Years on the road had taught him when to press and when to leave space. But something didn't sit right. She didn't say much, backpack still on her lap. Even now, they rode in silence for miles. The heater roared. Outside, the storm closed around them like a mouth. At a fuel station north of Rock Springs, Fred pulled in and killed the engine. Lights were off, pumps bagged. The whole place looked deserted. "Stay here," he said, stepping down into the snow. He returned minutes later with 2 microwavable sandwiches from a vending machine that had somehow escaped the outage. Inside, he handed one to her, watching as she tore into it like she hadn't eaten in days. "You running from something?" he asked quietly. She froze. "No, 'cause if you are and there's trouble behind you." "There's no trouble behind me," she snapped, then softened. "I'm not a criminal. Just, I didn't know where else to go." Fred studied her for a beat. "You picked a hell of a place." As the wind howled outside, Kelsey finally took off her coat. Her sweatshirt underneath was plain, but her jeans had holes, not the fashionable kind. She sat stiffly, eyes darting to each truck that rumbled by. Back on the road, Fred clicked on the CB. "Breaker 19. Anyone got eyes on the I-80 westbound past Rollins? Any clear stretches?" No response. Just hiss. "You always drive through this stuff?" Kelsey asked. Fred chuckled. "Used to it. Storms like this don't scare me. What scares me is my dispatcher breathing down my neck for a deadline I can't control." She smiled faintly. It was the first crack in the wall. Later, when they hit another closure, Fred parked behind a line of idling rigs and called his son. "Hey, Ryan. Don't worry, I'm fine. Just weather trouble." "You still out there?" Ryan's voice, tinny on speaker. "You're 52, Dad. This isn't noble, it's stubborn." Fred glanced at Kelsey, then back at the dash. "It's a job. Not all of us can sit in glass buildings and argue about PowerPoints. I'm just saying maybe it's time to..." "To what?" "Quit. Give up the one damn thing I'm good at." Ryan sighed. "Forget it. Stay safe." The line went dead. Fred didn't speak for a while. He stared out at the snow and sighed, deep in his chest. "You don't talk much about your family," Kelsey said softly. "Not much to say," Fred replied. "We've been drifting, like most folks." The silence between them changed after that. Not warmer, but less guarded. At 2 a.m., they rolled into a rest pull-off behind a decommissioned way station. Fred threw a wool coat over himself in the sleeper bunk. Kelsey sat up front, staring out into the night, backpack still clutched tight. From his bed, Fred muttered, "You don't sleep much, do you?" "I sleep when it's safe," she said. Fred didn't ask what that meant. Outside, snowflakes began to fall more slowly, fat, drifting petals on the windshield. The worst of the storm was passing, but Fred had the strange feeling that something bigger was just beginning. By morning, the storm had only deepened. Plows hadn't come, and the I-80 was now officially closed in both directions. Fred Clarkson checked the radio, then the road ahead, then his fuel gauge. None looked promising. Kelsey, curled in the passenger seat with the blanket around her, hadn't slept much. Her backpack was still glued to her side. She kept glancing out the window, subtle but frequent. "There's an old truck stop about 10 miles from here," Fred said, shifting gears. "Out of business, but it's shelter." Kelsey nodded, silent. They crawled through the snowy stretch until the crumbling signage of the truck stop appeared through the fog. Fred eased his rig into the lot. Only 2 trucks were parked in the far corner, engine off, snow piled on the windshields. "Not exactly the Ritz," he muttered, killing the engine. Inside the cab, the air felt colder despite the heater. Kelsey's tension hadn't eased. She stared out the frosted passenger window at the line of parked trailers, fingers rubbing a small keychain in her palm. Caught Fred's eye, dog tags and a triangular fob. "What's that?" he asked casually. "Something that doesn't concern you," she replied, too quickly. Fred frowned. "Everything in this cab concerns me now." She turned away, pocketing it without another word. Fred got out, stomped through snow to check the station building. Locked, dark, empty. Vending machines gutted. He returned with nothing but windburn and suspicion. Back inside, Kelsey had moved to the driver's seat and was watching something. Fred followed her gaze. A SUV creeping along the far side of the lot. Windows tinted, tires crunching softly. Past them slow. The driver never rolled down his window, but Fred caught the glint of dark glasses. And a look. "Friend of yours?" he asked. Kelsey shook her head, lips tight. The SUV turned at the exit and vanished into the white. Fred let the silence stretch, then restarted the engine. "You gonna tell me what that was?" "No, I'm not kidding. Neither am I." He gave her a long look, then shifted the truck into park. "You're not just some stranded hitchhiker, Kelsey. I've known enough drifters to know the difference." She didn't respond. Later, after the sun dipped again and the snow grew heavier, Fred lay in the sleeper bunk, flipping through the same 10 radio stations in hopes of a weather update. Frustrated, he switched to the CB, hoping for chatter, and accidentally left the mic open. Kelsey was still in the front, eyes locked on the same spot the SUV had appeared. Then, out of nowhere, bang. A shot. Then another. Sharp and close. Fred sat up instantly. "Get down!" he shouted, lurching forward just as 2 more cracks rang out. The side mirror exploded. Kelsey dropped to the floor, yanking her backpack to her chest. Fred crawled across the cab, slammed the engine to life and flipped the exterior lights off. The SUV peeled away, tires screeching against the ice. And just like that, it was gone again. Heart racing, Fred stared through the windshield, watching the snow settle once more. His phone buzzed. "Ryan." He answered, still breathless. "Dad." "What the hell was that?" "I heard yelling on the scanner." "Was that gunfire?" Fred froze. He'd left the CB on. "I'm okay," he said quickly. "It's nothing." "You don't get to say that after I just heard you scream over gunshots." Fred ran a hand down his face. "I'll explain later. Promise me you'll get off that road." Fred ended the call without promising anything. Back inside, Kelsey was sitting upright again, pale but composed. Her backpack was unzipped now, just enough for Fred to catch a glimpse of a badge case tucked inside. "You want to explain?" he asked. She didn't answer, just unzipped the pack further and held up the black wallet. Inside, a silver federal badge. Agent Kelsey Moore, Federal Motor Carrier Task Force. Fred blinked. "You're a Fed. I've been undercover for 8 months. The person who just shot at us, he's part of a cargo theft ring. They've been targeting rigs along this corridor." Fred sank into the seat beside her. "And you thought hitchhiking was a good way to infiltrate them?" "I had to disappear from my team. They compromised our last drop point. I needed to move without being tracked." Her voice cracked slightly as she looked down. "I lost a partner months ago. We were on a similar case. He trusted someone he shouldn't have, and paid for it." She took a breath, steadying herself. "Since then, I don't ask for help." Then she glanced at Fred. "So yeah, you stopping for me?" "That wasn't part of the plan." He gestured toward the bullet hole in the mirror. "Great job staying invisible." She exhaled. "Look, I didn't plan this, but when you stopped I saw a chance. I didn't know if you could be trusted." Fred laughed dryly. "That's mutual." She hesitated, then added, "One of the names tied to this ring, someone feeding info to the thieves, is connected to Clarkson Freight." Fred stiffened. "You're saying my company's dirty?" "I'm saying someone inside is helping them. Someone high up. Maybe logistics. Maybe management." Fred looked away. "Joe?" Kelsey said nothing, and in that moment, still reluctant to believe it, Fred Clarkson felt betrayed. And it was colder than the snow outside. The snow had softened overnight, but the silence hadn't. It pressed into the cab like a second skin. Fred Clarkson sat with both hands on the wheel, the engine idling, headlights piercing through mist. Kelsey sat beside him, her federal badge now tucked away again, but its weight hadn't left the air between them. He hadn't said much since she mentioned the name Clarkson Freight. His company, the people he trusted until then. His silence wasn't anger. It was calculation. They rolled back onto the service road leading toward the westbound way station near Granger. It should have been active, this was a main corridor. But the building was dark. No lights, no signs of staff, not even the scale readout glowing on the panel. "That's not normal," Fred muttered. Kelsey checked her handheld. "It's not on the outage list." It was marked operational as of midnight. Fred parked the truck near the scale entrance, engine running low. The wind outside had calmed, but the cold clung to the windows. Kelsey tapped rapidly on her screen, navigating through a secured channel. "We intercepted a packet yesterday," she explained. "It was encrypted, but I think it referenced a secondary drop site." Fred raised an eyebrow. "What kind of drop site?" "A cargo yard. Old, unregistered, south of the state line." He looked at her. "And you think it's going down tonight?" "I do," she said, not looking up. "Timing fits." The SUV back at the truck stop? He was early, probably scouting the route. Fred chewed the inside of his cheek, weighing it. The highway was treacherous, but the real danger wasn't the ice anymore. It was the people hiding behind company logos and handshakes. He thought of Doug Hardiman. They'd shared a dozen routes in the mid-2000s, always reliable and on time. One December, Doug disappeared on a return leg from a run for Clarkson Freight. Dispatch said the weather swallowed him somewhere near Elk Mountain. No wreckage was ever found. Fred hadn't thought about Doug in years. Until now. He turned to Kelsey. "Doug vanished pulling a load for Clarkson. We all said it was a blizzard, but maybe it was something else." Kelsey looked at him carefully. "You think he found out too much?" Fred nodded once. "I think he saw something he wasn't supposed to." She angled the device toward him. A set of GPS coordinates flashed across the screen. "This is where I believe the handoff's happening tonight. You can drop me off nearby if you'd rather stay out of it." Fred stared out the window. "And then what?" "I drive off. Keep pretending nothing stinks back home." "You've done nothing wrong," she said. But maybe I kept my eyes shut too long. He threw the truck into gear. I'm not driving away. By dusk, they approached the back roads leading to the supposed cargo yard. The roads narrowed, the snow thinned, and trees pressed closer to the two-lane path. It wasn't on any delivery route Fred had ever taken. Used to be a rail depot here, he said. Closed down after '98. Perfect place for a transfer no one's supposed to see, Kelsey muttered. Fred pulled off the road into a patch of trees, cutting the lights and letting the truck idle behind cover. In the distance, faint illumination glowed beyond a rusted chain-link fence. Kelsey zoomed in with a monocular from her bag. 2 rigs, 1 box truck. Black SUV just pulled in. That's them. Fred scanned the scene. You sure we can't wait for backup? I've been off-grid too long. They don't know I'm here. I couldn't risk comms after that last hit. Fred looked back at the sleeper cab. Snow clung to the mirrors like frostbite. You said you didn't know if I could be trusted, he said quietly. I was wrong. He checked the fuel, then reached under the seat for a long flashlight and an old CB mic. He held it out. We might not stop them tonight, but we can shine a light they can't ignore. Miles away, Ryan Clarkson sat in his apartment, eyes fixed on a news ticker scrolling across his laptop screen. Federal Task Force targets cargo theft ring on I-80 corridor. The article listed cities, descriptions, names of companies under scrutiny. Clarkson Freight wasn't mentioned, but Ryan recognized enough details to connect the dots. He grabbed his keys and his coat. He felt a knot in his chest, not because of embarrassment or disagreement, but because he realized he didn't know who his father truly was out there. What he risked, what he endured. I was wrong, he whispered, echoing words his father would never hear from him, unless he said them face to face. He thought back to when he was 10, sitting in the cab of Fred's truck during summer break. Back then, he thought the road was boring, just dust and gas stations. But now, all he could think about was how safe he'd felt, how steady his father had always been, even when the world outside was chaos. Ryan slid behind the wheel and pointed the car west. Back at the edge of the yard, Fred watched the shadows move. Cargo was being offloaded under makeshift lights. No forklifts, just brute manpower. No logs. Kelsey took photos silently. Then a voice on the CB. It was weak, scrambled, but Fred caught it. Unit 7 to Ghost Dog. Confirmed manifest cleared. Expect inbound in 10. Fred grabbed the mic. Ghost Dog, you got eyes west of the ridge. Something's coming. You won't like it. Silence. Then movement. One of the men on the ground looked up, signaling the others. The SUV's headlights blinked once, then shut off entirely. They heard you, Kelsey whispered. Good, Fred said, gripping the wheel. Let 'em sweat. She raised her radio. They'll run. But now they know someone's watching. Fred nodded. His fingers tightened on the wheel. For Doug, he said. Kelsey looked at him, surprised. For all of them, she added. And the Peterbilt rumbled in the dark, waiting. Not for snow to pass, but for the truth to finally break through. The air in the valley was colder than the mountaintop. Fred Clarkson guided his rig slowly down the unlit access road, engine barely above idle. The trees had thinned, opening into a wide clearing littered with rusted containers and warped fences. Up ahead, barely visible beneath weak floodlights, was the yard. 2 box trailers, SUV parked at an angle, and men moving, checking manifests, flashing lights into containers. The whole place pulsed with the nervous energy of a deal unfolding under a deadline. Fred killed the headlights and cut the engine. The truck sighed as it settled into stillness. Beside him, Kelsey adjusted her earpiece and opened a secure line on her comms unit. Static. She cursed under her breath. No signal this deep. They must be using dampeners. Fred grunted. Figures. For a long minute, they sat in the dark cab, watching the scene unfold. Then Kelsey pointed to one of the figures walking between the trucks. A man in a parka, clipboard in hand, barking orders. Fred leaned forward. Even through the grainy glow of the lights, he recognized the gait. The height, the way the man pushed his sleeves up halfway, just like he always had. Joe, Fred whispered. That's Joe Mendez. Kelsey looked at him. You sure? 25 years, Fred said, jaw clenched. I'd know that man in a snowstorm. Kelsey reached for her phone again. We don't have time to wait for backup. If they finish loading and split, this whole thing disappears. Fred stared out at the gate. It was chained shut but barely standing. Beyond it, a gravel road snaked down toward the interstate. They'd be gone in 10 minutes. He shifted his grip on the wheel. What are you doing? Kelsey asked. Fred didn't answer. He restarted the engine. Fred, don't. I'm just a trucker, he muttered. So I'll do what truckers do. And then he floored it. The Peterbilt roared to life, turbo whining, tires spitting gravel as it surged forward. Kelsey grabbed the dashboard for balance as the truck smashed through the brittle chain-link gate. The impact snapped metal and sent the gate skidding sideways like paper in the wind. Men in the yard scattered. Someone yelled. The SUV tried to lurch forward, but Fred cut the wheel hard and slid the rig broadside, blocking the only exit with 40 tons of steel. Kelsey threw open the door and jumped down, drawing her weapon. Federal agent. Drop it. Gunfire cracked from the far side, 1, 2, then 3 quick bursts. A round struck the front fender of the Peterbilt with a metallic pop. Fred ducked behind the door, gripping the steering wheel, angling the truck's body between Kelsey and the shooters. She moved low, quick, returning fire as more men scrambled behind the trailers. Then, finally, sirens. Blue and red lights spilled into the yard as a convoy of law enforcement vehicles tore into the scene from the South Road. Floodlights lit the yard like a stadium. The remaining gunmen dropped their weapons. Kelsey raised both hands, badge visible. All suspects down or in custody. Fred stayed behind the wheel, breathing hard, knuckles still white. His heart thudded in his ears. A young agent approached the cab, wide-eyed. Are you the one who blocked them in? Fred didn't answer, just opened the door and climbed down, boots crunching in the gravel. Across the yard, 2 officers dragged Joe Mendez into the light. His jacket was torn, cheek bleeding from a fall. When he saw Fred, his eyes narrowed, not with guilt, but disappointment. I trusted you, Fred said quietly. You sat at my table. You held my son in your arms. We built this life together. Joe didn't respond. And all that time, Fred continued, voice thick with disbelief, you were moving pieces behind my back. Doug vanished, and you let us believe the storm took him. You looked me in the eye for years, and lied. Joe looked away, jaw clenched, but said nothing. You didn't just steal cargo, Fred muttered. You stole people's lives. Joe looked away. Kelsey stepped up beside Fred. He was coordinating the routes, manipulating manifests. We've got it all now. Fred exhaled. Hope it's enough to find Doug's trail. She nodded, solemn. It's a start. As officers processed the scene, Kelsey reached into her bag and pulled out a small medal, worn, simple, the kind you don't brag about. She'd earned it years ago on a quiet operation no one remembered. This is yours, she said. Fred shook his head. I don't need a medal. You risked your life to help stop a criminal network. You deserve recognition. I'm just a driver, he said. We stop when something ain't right. That's the job. Kelsey smiled faintly. Then maybe we need more like you on this road. 3 weeks later, the storm was a memory. Fred sat alone at a truck stop counter just off Route 287, nursing a coffee and picking at a plate of scrambled eggs gone cold. The news played quietly in the corner. Another theft ring dismantled. More praise for anonymous federal work. He didn't care for headlines. The bell above the door jingled. Fred looked up. Ryan. His son stood there awkwardly, wearing a thick coat and carrying a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Didn't expect to find you this fast, he said, stepping closer. Fred blinked. What are you doing here? Ryan dropped the bag. I got my CDL permit. Fred stared. You? I've been thinking, Ryan interrupted. I was wrong. About the road. About what you do. You don't just drive. You see things. Carry things. Protect people. Fred set down his fork. You quit your job? Ryan shrugged. Let's call it a career shift. Silence passed between them, long and uncertain, but not uncomfortable. Fred finally gestured toward the counterstool beside him. Hope you don't mind long hours and bitter coffee. Ryan, Saturday, I'll learn. Later that day, father and son climbed into the cab, ready to hit the road on a new journey. The storm had passed, but the road stretched on, clear, wide, and open. They weren't just driving. They were moving forward, together. This story reminds us that bravery isn't always loud. It's in the choices we make when no one's watching. What would you do if you discovered the people you trusted were part of something criminal? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us again on Embrace the Journey. See you in the next video.